Let's just get started. So HER.Talks, this is a discussion about women, about health, about related topics that are critical for our forward movement. ESG and impact is always a hot topic, and lately, not all of it's great news, but it's become this buzzword and also, unfortunately, a checkbox, even though it has the huge intention of being impactful and making a difference in the world across so many sectors, including healthcare. For us at HERhealthEQ and so many people around the world, the current and future state of impact is absolutely on our minds. Improving healthcare for women is absolutely an imperative, and it's not only in this country, but it's absolutely around the world. Because when women don't have their health, they're not able to contribute to their community, their family, and society. And that negatively impacts everyone here, everyone around the world, in every other industry and every sector of the world. And so even if you're not in healthcare or ESG or CSR, impact affects all manners of life. I've just thrown out some buzzwords and acronyms, and I just kind of wanted to set a few definitions for everybody on the phone. ESG, environmental, social, and corporate governance, and CSR is corporate social responsibility. And so whether you're a massive healthcare company, a specialized nonprofit, an insurance company, or a global women's health nonprofit, impact is incredibly vital for your business. So I'm Marissa Fayer, the CEO of HERhealthEQ, and I'm honored to moderate this episode of HER.Talks, which today we're going to be talking about ESG, impact, and what that looks like in the next 1,000 days, which is more or less in 3 years. And HERhealthEQ's mission is to improve women's health by providing healthcare equipment to developing countries with a focus on women's health, non-communicable diseases, because those diseases can be detected, prevented, and treated with equipment if they only had it. So impact is absolutely core to what we do at HERhealthEQ. And as we both benefit from it and we distribute equipment to create impact. So I'm absolutely humbled and honored to be joined by these incredible panelists. And I'm going to let them briefly introduce themselves, and then we're going to jump into the discussion. But we have Vicki Glazar, who is the Corporate Social Responsibility Lead at GE Healthcare, and Steph Dreyer, who's the Vice Chair at the LAM Foundation and also Consumer Marketing Director at MetLife. And so at any time, if you're not speaking, just please mute yourself. And anytime the audience has a question, please add it to the comment section. We hope to get to it towards the end. But if I see something relevant, I'll just shoot it into our questions. And we have some questions, but we also want this to be, participatory. So feel free to put that out there for you. So I guess, Vicki, you're front of my screen. Would love you to start.
Great. Thanks, Marissa. I am so excited to be here. Thank you so much for inviting me. I am 1 month into a new role at GE Healthcare, new to me and new for GE Healthcare. It's leading corporate social responsibility and corporate philanthropy. And GE Healthcare is actually sort of a new company. It broke away is spun off from GE Corporate in January of this year. So we're a $15 billion startup with 50 years of legacy of leading medical technology around the world. So it's a fantastic opportunity. I'm so excited to sort of launch into it and build corporate social responsibility and a corporate foundation for the company, which is leading, it's sort of on the cutting edge of technology, artificial intelligence, and developing breakthroughs in healthcare designed to really make healthcare more human and more flexible. The company just this morning released a breakthrough quantitative and qualitative study called Reimagining Better Health, which shows that providers, physicians and clinicians, as well as patients and caregivers, are 100% united in their vision for the future of healthcare, that it be more human and that clinicians be able to be freed from some of the tasks that artificial intelligence will free them from, so that they can be their best selves and interact on a human level with patients.
That's incredible. Thank you so much, Vicki. Steph?
Yeah, well, thank you for having me. It's been such a thrill getting to know you and Vicki and more about the important missions that you're on. My background is that I have been in marketing for 20 plus years at this point. I'm not going to get too much more specific about years because it makes me feel bad. But right now I serve as the marketing director for national accounts at MetLife, where every day I am part of a mission to help people build a more confident future. But prior to Met, my work has been very connected to impact, most recently at Mondelez, so the makers of Oreos and Sour Patch Kids and Ritz and Triscuit and many more, where my job was to bring their purpose of snacking made right to life. And that was in very real ways that consumers could see and taste and feel. It led to work on ingredient transparency and recyclable packaging, promoting mindful eating, and even working with farmers in Cote d'Ivoire to promote a better life for them and their families. And then prior to that, to connect into our healthcare interest, I spent 13 years at Bayer Healthcare, where every day I came to life to empower people to live healthier, happier lives. But outside of my day jobs, I have two distinct joys when it comes to impact. It is a privilege and an honor to serve as the vice chair on the board of directors for the LAM Foundation, which is a small but mighty force that urgently seeks a cure for a disease called lymphangioleiomyomatosis, which we call LAM, LAM. And that's important because it gives me a chance every single day to raise money and fight this disease and enable women to live better lives so that they can go have impact. It's also important because I am a LAM patient myself, which means that about 10 years ago, I was diagnosed with this rare thing I'd never heard of and told I might only have 5 years left to live. And so that really forced me to think about the impact I wanted to have while I was here and the legacy I wanted to leave behind. And I realized very early that as, you know, someone in marketing in a position of power surrounded by resources, I could leverage those resources to create some good in the world. So
that's amazing. Thank you for sharing that. So in our pre-chat, there were some similar themes that came up between all three of us and, you know, and what we're working on and what we're passionate about, which I think you can, you know, the listeners can very much hear. Impact is how it's integral to our life and our work for all of us. What came up as the really big theme, how to make it sustainable for the future by working collaboratively together. And those are some of the themes that, you know, today I think we'll talk through. Vicki, let me start with you. You've been in CSR, you know, almost most of your career, and even before it was popular or, you know, or in style and in vogue. So what's changed and actually what's new? Because I never like to look back. Like to look forward, but you know, what's really changed, I think maybe for the better, and what's new that you're excited about?
Yeah. Well, yeah, you are 100% right. It is in vogue. Well, I think it maybe went in vogue and then maybe it turned a corner. But one of my decks shows this graph. It's a hockey stick shaped graph, which I think is interesting that, you know, over the many decades that corporate social responsibility, corporate purpose conversations have been going on, there was a sort of steady rise. And more, you know, companies started to talk about their purpose. There was, you know, Larry Fink's letter, which talked about corporations serving a larger purpose than just returns to shareholders. And so we went along in a very sort of happy environment until very recently, when all of a sudden, you know, the instances of CSR being discussed in the popular and corporate culture just sort of took off. And with that, you know, came the rise of the discussion of woke capitalism and some other things that many of us who had been doing this work for a long time went, what? This is not the intent. You know, this is not a political debate. This is about doing good and helping underserved people. And so we were all sort of scratching our heads as to what it can be controversial about that. So, I mean, I think that's what's changed most recently. It was interesting. Last Thursday, there was a segment on CBS Morning News. I don't know if you saw that, about this very topic. And they showed on the screen an article from the New York Times from 1963. And it quoted the CEO of, what was the company? At any rate, it said, do corporations have a social duty? It was the CEO of US Steel who said, that is quite beyond what a corporation should do. And then next part of the story was the focus on Target and Budweiser and the Body Shop, which dedicates its entire business, to giving back to the communities. So I think, that certainly has changed and is indicative of the time that we are operating in now as we continue to do our social responsibility work against the backdrop of a crazy world.
Yeah, I mean, it's scary that we're quoting things from the 60s, but thrilled that it's changed and that it is in vogue. I mean, listen, it's popular for, and it's necessary. I think, a lot of the people who work with and for us and have been employees and employers, this is part of and should be part of the culture. And I know so many organizations that are, and not even organizations, companies that are creating, they're creating, B Corps, they're creating social missions as part of what they do. And they're just as successful as any of the others. And sometimes more so because they're having more employee retention. There's less turnover. There's more people are engaged and they want to work there and they want to be there and they want to give it their all and they want to, go above and beyond, which ultimately shows in returns. And so I don't think we're in this state anymore of it's optional. And I hope that that's what everybody feels. And I'm sure that there's always going to be outliers and, it is what it is. But, you even see, banks and, any type of company that you wouldn't think. And I bet US Steel now has I don't even know if they're in existence, but if they were, they would certainly have an impact side of things. And it would probably be giving back to the communities in which they're working in and maybe creating housing and other infrastructure. And so it's just how life is. And so, now we need to talk about how to make it better and how to put it into practice. And so, Steph, I wanted to ask you that. How can we put impact into practice, maybe on a weekly, daily, just in our businesses and in our lives? How do we do that?
Yeah, well, obviously I'm a little bit biased. I think job number one is go sign up to be on the board of directors of an organization that's doing good in the world. Sure. I don't think I had initially thought that was a place that I would find myself, but I am so glad that I accepted the invitation because, as I said, every day now, I get to be part of an organization that is fueling women with a rare disease and their families with resources to help them navigate this journey and raising money to go do the work we need to do and achieve the mission that we've set out to achieve, to provide women with clinical resources and actual medical care that serve their actual medical disease. This is a disease, LAM is a disease that is often misdiagnosed. And so we believe that there are hundreds and thousands of women out there that don't have the right diagnosis and as such aren't getting the right care, diagnosed with things like asthma, which is quite different, or anxiety, or in my case, hysterical woman's disease was something that's a medical professional once said to me, right? So now that I have
the 1890s?
Right, exactly.
Isn't that what they used to say?
It's true story. So now that I have the support of this organization and the right care, we don't have a cure yet, but I do have the right support. And so when I think about, impact on an everyday basis, everything I can do to support this organization and find a cure for the thousands of women that have been diagnosed and those that haven't yet is a way that I can have impact every day. But not everybody serves on a board. And so I will also say, there are ways in our day job that we can promote positive change, whether that's learning about where the tensions are and where your organization can make a difference, be an ally, represent those who are underrepresented in the right way, hooking into programs that your organization has already created. So in my personal experience at MetLife, I've had the opportunity to participate in global litter pickups to create bags for children experiencing foster care so that they have something where they can transport their personal belongings from home to home. Even working with Girls Who Code, which is a fantastic organization promoting STEM for women. But if your organization doesn't have those things, go seek out opportunities, go create your own. Just in my marketing team, we had great success with a drive to donate supplies to a women's shelter, or my personal favorite, we participated in a program called Grow a Row, in which after one day as a team building experience, we provided 244,000 servings of fresh food to those experiencing food insecurity. So there are very real ways to have impact in your day job, but the one that I'm the most proud of, and the one that I really try to encourage people to look for, is this sort of trifecta of good, which probably means something in the industry, but my words, where you can find impact that not only supports people and planet, but also the business and the team. And so a great example of that is, at MetLife, there is a robust tree planting program that existed far before I had come here and learned about it. But separate from that, my team supports salespeople who are often celebrating anniversaries with their clients. And we found an opportunity to connect the two programs. And when there is a meaningful anniversary with a client, it is now in our culture, in our routine, to recommend to the sales team that we plant trees on behalf of that anniversary, to celebrate that anniversary. So, again, good for the client, good for us, good for people on the planet, good for the team. So that's my recommendation.
That's so interesting. And then, maybe I'll put this out to both of you guys. Steph, you were saying MetLife does this, and Vicki, I know from GE, from legacy GE, and now what you're trying to create, in GE healthcare. I mean, it needs to be part of infrastructure. So how do we embed? What are some of the success factors and to ensure that impact's embedded into infrastructure for the long term? And also, another question that needs to almost tag on to that is, how do we iterate? Because what worked 10 years ago, 5 years ago, is not necessarily always going to work in the future. I think planting trees is always going to work. Let's just be clear, that's always a thing. But there are others that we need to, there needs to be iteration. And how do we embed impact into infrastructure for long-term success? Because I don't mean that it's always going to be a long-term partnership for 27 years and that's the only partnership that you can have. There are so many different new organizations, new companies, new causes, new things that are coming out. We've seen it in the last 3-4 years, quite honestly. So I think that we need to make sure that there's flexibility, but we want long-term success. So that was a long-winded question to say, how do we do this? How do we embed impact into the infrastructure of large organizations, mid-sized organizations, and even small organizations that then can benefit either people, planet, nonprofit organizations, et cetera? How do we do this? What are your some both of you, what are the success factors? How do we make this happen? Either one of you.
Definitely start, and then I'll chime in.
Happy to. That's a far easier question to answer when I think about the LAM Foundation. But what I will say is, whether you're talking about a nonprofit where impact is the focus, that is the business objective, or a larger organization that is operating around a purpose, I will say, I joked with somebody the other day, the way to do this is to do three things: culture, culture, and culture, right? When we make this a natural part of the culture, the good just it almost creates itself. You kind of sort of can't help it. So one of the things that's happened at the LAM Foundation in the last few years, and I'm looking out and seeing Sue Sherman on the call, Sue introduced this idea of a mission moment. into the culture of the organization, both with the staff and at the board level. And so we stop ourselves on a regular basis to talk about a mission moment, an opportunity where we have helped a patient or, promoted the science or whatever it is, that thing that sort of fires people up and reminds them of why we've come to do the work we're here to do. And I think that idea of culture, it just makes such an impact. I think back to the days at Mondelez. When I got there, I started interviewing sales and brand owners, and I would tell them my story with LAM, and I would talk about the impact I wanted to have and the legacy I wanted to leave behind, and then I would very casually ask them what their legacy on these brands would be. And most likely they didn't expect the question. They didn't really know how to answer it. Or if they did, it was an answer about driving growth for the business. And on my snarkier days, I might ask them, hey, in 10 years, how many people are going to remember that you grew this brand by 2%? Versus how many people are going to remember that you made a thumbprint on people and planet, this idea of impact because you impacted the rate of recycling in this country, or you showed up for the underrepresented communities amongst the people you serve. And it created this big shift in terms of how those brand owners thought about impact and purpose and what programs they started lifting up.
No, that's great. I think we just lost Vicki, who I hope will come in a second. I just saw her nodding and then pop out. I think she hit the wrong button to unmute herself. But she will come back in a second. Speaking of the LAM Foundation, and we'll go back to the question, but speaking of the LAM Foundation, I mean, you turned something that happened in your life. Oh, Vicki, you're back. Before I ask my next question,
yes, I think unfortunately Zoom dumped me out.
Okay, well, you're back. We're excited about it. So I just wanted to get your thoughts on everything that Steph was saying and kind of to the question too.
Yeah, I apologize. I missed a little bit of it as I was scrambling to get back. But what I was thinking about is the foundations that I've worked with and the corporate philanthropy that I've worked 10 years or so had with each other of creating impact. And, they or whatever, but they just work to create impact and found the ways to success, which include working within the community. So not, going and dictating they need, really listening to what is needed from the community leaders, from the elders, from the local healers, from the community leaders, and trying to meet them where they are in terms of finding a way to work together with them, deliver what was really needed. Working in partnership with others, not about the branding or getting the credit for the work. Bringing in very inclusively other NGOs, other companies who had expertise so that they could work together to provide a holistic solution, and looking for to find whether long-term relationship over decades reduces or whether it's tackling, a solution that has an end date, but finding those innovative solutions that need some backing to prove themselves so that they can be sustainable, that they can go out and get their own funding, that they can develop the data that they need, to establish momentum behind them. Those are three of the things that I think are the recipes for success and enable the movement to be sustainable and embedded in the corporation's culture over time.
No, that's incredible. Thank you, Vicki. I think, it's something that at HERhealthEQ, we always continue to think about, and it's about working with organizations and companies and others, et cetera, that are very aligned And so not everybody's going to align to everything, and not everyone's going to want to do everything. And, Steph, you were saying at MetLife, you guys plant trees. Well, that might not be the solution at GE Healthcare. And there's plenty of work that needs to get done. We all have to do it together. Or we all need to do it. We don't need to do it all of us together at the same thing. Everyone can't choose one thing, because then only one thing gets solved when there's so many other things that needs to get solved. And I, Vicky, I like what you were saying. It has to be embedded, and it has to be very culturally important and on the ground. And that's a lot of the work that we've seen as well. Like, it's not us in an imperialistic, way coming in to, work and save you and do all this. No. Giving you solutions so that we can walk away and, hopefully you don't ever need to talk to us again, except to tell us how great things are going. And, and that's empowering in itself, and, creating new forests so that the infrastructure and life can live and people can breathe clean air. I mean, that's important. And, creating solutions and, diseases, for the need to be solved, like everyone working together. Is that going to be the mission of every, corporation and every company? No, it's not. And I think like finding the right partners also is one of the most important things for everyone to collaboratively work together. On one of our previous HER.Talks, we were kind of talking about like, how can we not be in competition with each other? And I think that's kind of also really important, because we can't be fighting each other. It works for some, it doesn't work for other, but we're all trying to do something great. And there's plenty of work for, ESG and for impact that needs to get done. Just as another reminder, if there's any questions that anybody has, please, feel free to shout them in. But I mean, what do you guys think about the future of ESG and impact? Obviously I'd be remiss if I didn't ask the hot topic of the year, which is AI. So like, how does AI factor into ESG and impact, if at all? And I don't want that to be the only answer to what the future is, because certainly I don't think that is the only answer. I will, I guess, cede my answer to say it's a part of it, it's not all of it. But what's the future of ESG? What's the future of impact? CSR, all those acronyms that I've thrown out before. What's the future for all of us?
Vicki, I know you have some thoughts on AI. Why don't you take it away?
Yeah, I did a lot of research on AI when I was investigating this job, because GE Healthcare is very authentically involved in the space and a leader in AI, has been using AI in its products for a long time. And so I read some books and I looked at different points of view. Some are very, very scary. Some are awful. But some are very optimistic. So I was able to spend some time just yesterday with the Chief Technology Officer at GE Healthcare, a man named Taha Haskout, and he a long way. And if you look at the things that he's saying, online and in forums and on YouTube, I think you will feel optimistic as well, because there are some very smart people who are responsibility minded and inclusiveness minded, who are overseeing, in particular in healthcare, like I said earlier, that the company released some of this data in a report today about how technologies used to free up. There's a tremendous dearth of healthcare workers, a tremendous shortage, and out of the pandemic, tremendously overworked and dissatisfied with their work environment. And so there's a real need, to employ technologies to up and get back to loved about their profession, why they went in for. And so I'm very optimistic that corporations as a whole, in line with the trends that we talked about earlier, are getting better at understanding how to social report on social impact, and are more inclusive than ever before in history. So I feel like things are going in a good direction, even though we have a weirdly polarized political environment. I feel like there are enough people who are headed in the right direction. Best collective word.
Yeah, my build on that, I think, like Vicky, I've sort of seen both sides of the AI story. And while there are some really scary potentials, the thing that I've chosen to focus on is, I think what AI is going to do for us is going to teach us to ask better questions, right? We've seen a lot about, prompt engineering is sort of the new skill. And, it's easy to sort of roll your eyes or laugh at it because it is now already a buzzword. But if you really think about what prompt engineering is doing, is it's making us be more thoughtful about asking better questions to get to more meaningful solutions. So, at MetLife, my team is thinking about how do we ask better questions? I think at the LAM Foundation, there's been a lot of discussion lately about how do we ask better questions to get to better solutions and unlock, even more progress towards our mission of finding a cure. So that, that's how I choose to think about AI. Is I do think it's gonna teach us as human beings to ask really, really important questions.
So besides AI, are there other future, like, where do we go? Where do we go with impact? Is it utilizing, obviously it's utilizing the tools that we have and ask better questions, but outside of tech, is this the trend to stay in? Is this our next, 1,000 days, 3 years? Is that what this is? Is it continued impact? Is it, continued focus on ESG and CSR and making impact in the world? I mean, personally, I think it's here to stay. That's my own personal opinion. I'm hoping, obviously, for HERhealthEQ's sake, it is here to stay. And I would say, but what, is impact here? Is this what we're focused on forever, or is this a hot trend? Speaking of ESG and trends going in and out, is this a trend or is this forever? I mean, we don't have crystal balls. Let me just caveat this entire conversation, especially if you're listening to this on the podcast. We don't have crystal balls sitting in front of us, but it's more, what do you guys think the next 1,000 days is going to be?
I think they started asking that question in 1963, or maybe before in the 50s. So I think that it's definitely here to stay. It's interesting to think about where it will go with AI and other advanced technologies. We will know more and be able to do more than we've ever done before. We'll be able to make connections that don't occur to the human brain necessarily, but come out of, big data. I think, back to my last answer, I think it's definitely here to stay, and we'll just keep getting better at it.
Right. Steph, any predictions?
I think my prediction at this point is where we can find those really meaty trifectas, right? Where it's, good for people and planet, good for the business, and good for the teams that are supporting the work. I think that's the trend that I see moving forward. That's where we're going to see a lot of investment and success. And then what I hope is part of the future is better partnering between large organizations and small nonprofits that have a very clear mission and the ability to fully focus on that mission. So again, finding alignment between large organizations and their goals and the work that the nonprofits are doing.
That's great. That's great. We had a question come in actually too, but we had one question come in from Sue. So how do we measure impact? How will companies, and I think this is also great on a larger scale, how do large companies, I think smaller nonprofits and organizations understand it's, especially in healthcare, it's very, people impacted, and better health. So how do companies from a larger scale measure impact? Is it taking what the smaller companies are measuring, or are there different ways to measure?
I think there's a movement from measuring outputs to measuring outcomes. I think that there has been a developing sophistication. So, back in the day when corporate foundations did their thing and they did it separately and weren't really integrated into the companies, they just were able to sort of sit back and go, gosh, we did great. Doesn't everybody love what we're doing? But then over time, there became more demands on, well, what is the impact that you've made, and how can you describe it and quantify it? And so they began to measure outputs. Well, we've reached these many people. We've, spent this much money. We've printed this many brochures. And now there's a real movement to say, okay, we've done all this stuff, but what did it do? Was it the right thing? Did we just do a bunch of stuff? Or did we really improve people's lives? And if so, how? And so the foundations that I've worked with have done a lot of work in that arena to really pester their grantees quite significantly to say, answer these 5,000 questions on the work that you've done, to try to level up and say, across the board, how have we changed the world? And so there's really kind of been a back and forth there, I think. And now we're striking a balance between measuring every little tiny thing and really taking an informed view on what has been the change over time.
That's great. There's a question that came in from Ronnie Burke that said, how do we stay ahead of the political woke narrative, about CSR, at least on a PR level? I think everything, I can, chime in for this one as well, and welcome both of you to hear your thoughts. I think we need to do what's right rather than, what's quote unquote woke, and just doing the right thing and talking about that, exactly what Vicki just said before, measuring impact, talk about the people, talk about what you're doing. That's the impact, whether we call it ESG, CSR, a new acronym that comes up tomorrow, et cetera, it doesn't matter what it is. ESG started not to be measuring this type of impact. It was trying to, is a catch-all for everything. And now there's so many different sides of it. It came back because, a lot of people wanted to reenact or, bring back the checkbox and say like, there's more conferences to talk about it. There's more things to talk about. So I don't think anything of it should be done for, woke or PR purposes. I think it should be done solely on doing the right thing and doing the work, but happy to have either of you chime in too.
I couldn't have said it better. The only thing I would add is, where it's right for the world and right for the business, that's a win-win, right? And that's a fully supportable strategy, right? So where you have those moments of synergies, whether that's in a small organization or a large organization, that's where I just see nothing but goodness.
I don't know who is credited with this quote of "you can't please all the people." I've heard Abraham Lincoln, I've heard others, but stay the course, and you will please the people who you need to please. And you can't worry about all different naysayers. I think, and I will say, this may sound naive, but I will say that the corporate leaders that I have worked with have felt that way. Despite what you see, in social media, the corporate leaders have said, we are behind your efforts to serve the underserved, to solve for unmet needs, and we're willing. So,
yeah, that's great. So Steph, just wanted to ask also quickly, you something happened to you in your own personal life, and that you changed and made it about the future and about impact. How do you do that? Like, it's so, I can't imagine, it's so hard. And the fact that you're willing to talk about it and, be the vice chair of this organization. you could have just sat and wallowed and, taken the benefits of the LAM Foundation and, but you chose to change life and make an impact. How?
Yeah. Well, first and foremost, with the support of the LAM Foundation. So I would encourage everyone to go to thelamfoundation.org and check out the incredible work that this organization does. One of the first things that happened after my diagnosis was I did get in touch with the foundation, and it felt incredible to have support. And I begged to speak to other women with this disease. This is a progressive, ultra rare disease that impacts women and has no cure. So finding any sort of support out there is really critical. And the first woman I spoke to, she told me a pretty harrowing story about how LAM kept her from living the life she wanted to live and kept her from being the woman she wanted to be. And that was terrifying. But the second call, she was a successful attorney, mom of two, effortlessly funny, and she only talked about LAM because I asked her to. And I made a decision the day I had that call that was the type of Lammy I was going to be. And it's fascinating to me now to think 10 years ago that a simple decision has led me on this incredible journey of mentoring and coaching people and having big opportunities to amplify the message, right? Podcasts and being published in the Lancet, which is still, I feel like that's a dream. Giving speeches at the NIH and taking the message of what it's like to be a rare disease patient and how it's as simple as making a decision to take something that others would describe as the worst thing that ever happened to them and make it the best thing that ever happened to me. So my personal purpose now is to enable others to flip bad things into good. And quite frankly, when I'm focused on that impact or driving change, I don't think about the disease. Don't worry about it. I'm so fully focused on the good that can come of it. And quite frankly, that's a better life to live.
For sure it is. That's incredible. Vicki, you're only 1 month into your career at GE Healthcare, which also is, making healthcare equipment and changing lives on a daily basis too. I know you're only 1 month in and you don't want to share all your secrets, but any insight on what the future of the impact strategy looks like or what you're hoping to craft it as, without divulging all your secrets, I promise.
Yeah, I think there are some places naturally where we belong. I am early in the journey, but those things are clear. We belong in the place that brings precision healthcare to underserved communities. We belong in the place that helps build trust around AI and ensures that as technology develops, that it's done responsibly and inclusively. We belong in the space that protects the planet from the climate impacts from the use of energy, and we belong in the circular economy, doing everything we can to make sure that our equipment doesn't wind up in the landfill. So there are some places naturally that I think belong in a leadership position. So I will be working in conjunction with the very visionary leaders at GE Healthcare to create some signature programs that put our money where our mouth is, invest our assets, both our financial assets, but the expertise and innovation of the company to focus on those really important issues.
That's incredible. So as we're wrapping up here, kind of last question actually came in from one of our attendees, Andy Levy, wanted to ask, so let's say it's June 6th and 2026. What does it look like to you related to ESG impact for both of you?
Well, I'll have a corporate foundation set up by then, or else I'll get a job. So the foundation will be operating globally and doing some great work with some great partners that we'll have just started working with. And then we will set those up with impact in mind initially, so we know how to track them. This is, a great luxury that we have being in this position, that we can start with impact at the beginning and figure out how to deploy these programs so that we can measure them. So by 2026, I'll probably have some early measurements, and we'll know what we're doing.
Fabulous.
Yeah, from a LAM Foundation perspective, what I know to be true is that by 2026, more women who have been misdiagnosed in the past and deserve that true diagnosis will have it, and they will have the care and the support and the resources they need to live healthier and happier lives. What I hope by 2026 is that, I mean, if we're really doing hope, let's find a cure by 2026.
Sure.
But if not, my hope is that we have even more young scientists investigating LAM and making progress toward that cure and helping to create a much better quality of life for the thousands of women that are living every day with this disease.
Amazing. Amen to both of that. Ladies, honestly, thank you so much. I could, these speakers said everything that I believe. And we want to continue this discussion, probably for hours if we could, but we'll be mindful of everybody's time.